Words are about to be spoken here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, presented to you exclusively by Podcast Heat and ad-free shows. My name's John Alba. I'm back in the back of the Cadillac here with my boy, the broken one, the woken one, the spoken one himself, Mr. Matt Hardy. We are reunited, my friend. It's like when the Hardy Boys got back together in 2006, but I don't think we have a new finisher this time around. I think we're playing the greatest hits. How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. Yeah, this is it's like the second time the Hardy Boys reformed the team. You're saying, okay, gotcha.
Exactly.
I didn't know if it was our WrestleMania 33 or not. Like when we just
no. 2000. I don't think it's that great. Like it hasn't been that long since we haven't been together. You know,
Right.
This is more 2007. We're going against Cade and Murdoch next week. You know, that's how I'm looking at this.
I got you. Hey, I was just gonna say, speaking of the show, I am currently in El Paso as we film this.
Viva la raza.
Yeah, and whenever I got to the airport, there were a lot of friends, a lot of fans there, which were hanging out. I mean, it was late too. Very respectful. They weren't mobbing the wrestlers as they came in. I came in with Wardlow, and he was talking about how respectful they were in general. But there was a guy said, "Oh man, I can't wait to take a picture with you. I love your podcast. 5, 5, 5, 5. I love that shit, man. It's great. I love your podcast," which was cool.
That's what's up. And you can leave those 5-star reviews because you never know when we're going to hit you with a contest, a little giveaway. We love doing those here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. And thank you to that fan for putting over the podcast. I probably helped that you were next to Wardlow, considering he's like the coolest dude in the world. So that's always good. He looks great with his haircut. He looks like a freaking.
I actually was telling him that when we were walking the baggage claim yesterday. I said, "Dude, how you feeling your haircut?" I said, "I mean, a lot of times someone with long hair, when they cut their hair, they look very different, but it works for you and it's good." And he said that he always had that type of haircut for the longest time until he grew his hair out. So it works for him. He's a handsome dude, man. A good looking.
Yeah, he is. He's a good looking son of a gun. Hey, special thanks to Sean Ross Sapp for filling in last week. I thought he did a great job with you, and he added some really great insight. What did you think of your Ask Matt with Sean last week?
It was enjoyable. It kind of felt like, as opposed to being the Hardy Boys with Matt and John, or the regular team, it was like I was teaming up with MVP. It was just a little different. I didn't know what to expect. So we made it work, though. You know, we were strange bedfellows, but it turned out to be a really fun and good podcast.
Can they coexist? That's what everyone wanted to know, and I would say that you coexisted plenty fine. Thank you again for Sean Ross Sapp for filling in.
Thank you, Sean.
I took, and this is no BS here, this was the first full vacation I took in 15 years this past week, Matt. And I feel rejuvenated. I feel full of life. I think this is what you feel like when Damascus takes over your essence, your entity,
yes,
your vessel. I'm feeling good right now, and I can't wait to talk about this episode. I got my live music feeling, and it got me thinking, man. Like you and I were talking last night. You brought up, I posted that video of me at the Springsteen show in Orlando that my friend took. Like that connection that you form with something you love, whether it's music or sports or whatever it is, or in this case, pro wrestling. There's just like nothing better than that. Like when you see those fans react the way they did for you at WrestleMania. That's just like the coolest feeling in the world, isn't it?
I mean, it is. It is the coolest feeling in the world, and it's just so flattering, and it's so humbling, and it just, when people show you that much appreciation and that much love, it's just unreal. I mean, like just the support that people have had for myself and Jeff over now 31 years has just been incredible, you know. And that moment was so special on its own, because it was like half-assed a surprise in the age where there are very few surprises. A lot of people were legitimately surprised we showed up, and just that reaction was just, it was monumental. It was monstrous. And the fact that people were chanting "delete" in the crowd, something that myself and Jeff built on a very, very small platform somewhere in a universe way away from WWE, it was just, you know, the ultimate compliment.
Well, we are talking about The Undertaker this week, and it is going to be an exceptional episode. I know that. But before we do, we have some orders of business. First off, big time shout out to Jerry the King Lawler, who suffered a stroke this past week. Iconic pro wrestling voice and character, basically the mayor of Memphis. Anything you'd like to say as a shout out to Jerry here?
Yeah, I just, kick out, Jerry. Hang in there and hang tough, man. Definitely thinking about you, and I'm wishing all the best for you. I just saw Jerry. I signed beside him at WrestleCon 10 days ago, in San Antonio, and we got to catch up a little bit. There's so many photos I saw that fans took where he's in the background of my photo, and he had to leave a little earlier to catch his flight that day before I did, and I didn't get a photo with him, and I would have loved to at that time. But I've grown to respect Jerry so much over the years, especially getting to know him some, and I've got to do some independent bookings with him and really get along with him. I really vibe with Jerry a lot, and I appreciate all his contributions to pro wrestling, and I just want to say that I hope he pulls through this, and I hope he can make a full recovery. That's my wish.
I feel like few people are as quick-witted as Jerry the King Lawler was on a microphone. And
yeah.
Just tremendous instinct. And obviously the Andy Kaufman angle changed wrestling. So there's so much that he contributed. And I would argue, too, the best working punches in the history of the business, Jerry the King Lawler.
He does have a great working punch.
Maybe he has a great shoot punch, too. I wouldn't want to find out. But as far as working punches go, all the best to Jerry.
Yes.
Iconic voice of my childhood, sending him
well
wishes for sure.
Same here. Someone that was an iconic figure as I was growing up, and you heard about all his legend, all the legends of Jerry Lawler and the Memphis territory and all his contributions and how he was king there. And then, getting to know him and work with him some, and then kind of, befriend him and stay in contact with him regularly. He's someone that I have their information, and we do stay in contact semi-regular. Great trios match on Rampage this past week. Really enjoyed you versus the Elite. I thought that there were some very creative ways to get into certain spots. There was a really the shadow you guys cast on the Elite, and maybe they could pull something off here. I thought it was a really well put together match that showcased your guys' chemistry. You and Ethan Page on the middle rope together was super fun. What'd you make of the trios match there? I enjoyed it, and it was a match that wasn't booked to happen initially. It changed later on that day, and we ended up doing that, and we found out about it just a little bit before we were starting the show. So it was kind of, it was. We didn't have a ton of time to put together some classic masterpiece, but we made it work, and we got in there and we did our thing. And more than anything, I was really happy of the storytelling that we did between myself and Ethan Page and Isaiah, and it really fit perfectly into what we're doing currently.
So what do you attribute that to when you're on short notice to put a match together and you're able to execute at the level that you did? How are people feeling afterwards, and why do you think you're able to get through something like that?
I mean, that's the art of being a pro wrestler, and one thing that's sad, I mean, wrestling has got a lot more complicated as time has gone on because it's a lot more athletic based, and they're looking for people that can do pretty amazing stuff. So a lot of times some of that stuff is such a, not only is it high risk, but it also takes everybody being on the same page at the same time. So you kind of have to sit down and think it through, kind of have an outline of what you're going to do. But in the big scheme of things, pro wrestling, it's supposed to be two guys who can go in the ring and just call it and do it on the fly. And that is truly an art, and it's lost a little bit in today's pro wrestling. But the Bucks and Kenny, they're definitely good enough under pressure. We can kind of throw something together quick, and we had enough on our team that there was enough experience and enough experience and enough talent that we could go in there and do that with those guys. So we did a hell of a deal. We had 14 minutes, and for a 6-man that was put together kind of last minute, I was pretty proud of it.
Nice little serotonin boost for you wrestling the Young Bucks again.
Yeah, man. I'll wrestle the Young Bucks every night and twice on Sunday. Love the Young Bucks.
That I know you do. And I want to bring this up too. You and Sean hit on it a little bit here. I was on my Patreon the other night, wrestlingaccordingtoalba.com, and one of my subscribers asked me, he's like, man, right now, has there ever been a better time to be a pro wrestling fan? Like, you have two amazing angles going on in WWE right now with the Bloodline and then the segment with Cody. Did you see the segment with Cody and Paul Heyman?
I did.
What'd you think of that?
I thought it was very well done. And I loved how it blurred the line between, reality and fiction. It was done very, very good. They took a different approach than I would guess most people would expect them to take, which I thought was a good thing. And I thought both of their execution was masterful. You know, Paul Heyman is so great, and we've known that. And Cody really is a special performer now, and he's killing it. He killed it in that deal that happened.
And it's just like you have this super hot angle with Sami Zayn,
right?
And you have to make sure that doesn't overshadow your WrestleMania main event. So they managed to weave those two things together, and I thought that was just so exceptional. And then you combine that with right now, I think AEW is doing some of the best episodes of Dynamite it's ever done in a row. And you've got a super hot, intriguing champion in MJF with a great challenger in Bryan Danielson, Moxley, and Hangman. Is there ever a better time to be a wrestling fan than right now in the United States, Matt?
I mean, you could argue that the Attitude Era and when ECW was around, but it's an amazing time. I mean, and the quality of matches you're seeing now is just like off the charts. And there's so much wrestling everywhere, and even the indie scene, they're doing really well. So it is an absolutely superb time to be a pro wrestling fan.
Like, and that's the thing.
And if I'm not mistaken, I want to go back to the point you made.
Sure.
They just did like a recap of Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
You're saying with
for SmackDown.
Well, for SmackDown, Sami Zayn, he confronted Roman and he laid out the challenge for a match, and then Roman beat the hell out of him and said that he wants to embarrass Sami in front of his family and friends, like how Sami embarrassed him in front of his friends and family.
So that is what happened on SmackDown.
That's on SmackDown, and then on Raw, you've got this other story building towards the main event of WrestleMania. So being able to interweave those things, man, and every character has different layers. It could go a myriad of different ways. It's so cool.
And I know where I messed up, but the recap was on Raw of Roman and Sami.
Yes, correct.
And then they just did the Cody Heyman promo there. I like the fact that they did that Sami wasn't present, and Roman wasn't there. So I feel like that made it much easier to focus on the correct things. Bingo. You know, so I love the fact that Sami is facing him in Montreal. A lot of people are going to go, "Oh my God, is Sami going to win? Is it going to be Sami versus Cody?" And that's always a great thing when you're a booker. If you have people, if it's very unpredictable, they're not sure which direction it's going to go. And I think they've done a good job with that because you have a lot of overplayers, and it seems like so far they've done a very good job at separating them enough that people aren't getting confused over the angle, or they're trying to, sabotage unintentionally one of the baby faces.
Well, exactly, and people are like, "Oh, Sami should be in the main event of WrestleMania." Man, Sami Zayn going into Montreal, his hometown, as the challenger.
Right.
I think you could argue that's even bigger than WrestleMania for this guy, which is super, super awesome in its own right. And yeah, you said the Attitude Era, it's a hotter time. Yeah, of course, there's a hotter time. There's also a lot of crap in the Attitude Era, as we've covered here on this podcast. Let it play out, pal. So right now, I just think WWE's firing on all cylinders with that. AEW right now is putting on some of the best Dynamites that it's put on. We just got this massive New Japan versus Impact show announced WrestleMania weekend. It's amazing, man. It's an amazing time to be a wrestling fan. So I'm all
especially if you're a diehard wrestling fan. I mean, I feel like even back then it was more people who looked at it more for the entertainment, but now the majority of wrestling fans look at it more for the content and quality of matches.
As Colin Coward would call us, the booger eaters are very excited about what's going on in the wrestling world right now. Matt Hardy, we are covering The Undertaker this week, but before we do, as I ask you every single week, please hit us with that Matt fact.
Matt fact: Matt doesn't answer calls from numbers that aren't in his contacts.
That seems to be a plausible thing. What if they leave you a voicemail and then you'll call them back, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like enough people know by now. If you, especially my business line from doing indies and appearances for so long, my number's very much out there. So it's just, if you've got a new number and you're someone I speak to regularly, shoot me a text. That's my first thing. I always tell people, text me first, and then we'll talk.
I like that. I think that's a very efficient way of doing business. Big Money Matt has got to be on top of all of his business dealings, and
it's very easy to pick up the number and get yourself in an awkward situation. So it's better to know who's on the other end of that phone.
Certainly so. All right, let's talk The Undertaker, my friend. Mark Calloway legend of the industry. He starts training in wrestling in 1986. He makes his debut in World Class Championship Wrestling in 1987 at the Dallas Sportatorium. And he's under a mask under the name Texas Red, and he loses to Bruiser Brody. Talk about a total fever dream of a match. This is your first match against a legend like Bruiser Brody. What do you remember about Dallas in that time period? It was a really hot wrestling territory. There was a lot of changes going on. We're talking mid to late 80s here. Any childhood memories of it?
There was a channel that we barely got on our just basic regular TV station, channel 13 or 16, and it was super snowy and fuzzy, but we would get WCCW, World Class Championship Wrestling, on there, like on a super late at Saturday nights. And if we'd ever be up to catch it, we would try to. But that was really about the most I got of a World Class Championship Wrestling was that. So I wasn't overly familiar with it. I knew about it more from the magazines.
He, in this match, also was managed by one Percy Pringle, which is
wow,
so crazy, because we'll delve into that in just a few minutes. But he seasons himself a little bit, former basketball player, stands out in a territory like Dallas, and he eventually makes his way to WCW as Mean Mark Callis. And he's nothing special at all. Even after he's paired with Paulie Dangerously, Paul Heyman, as his manager. When do you first remember seeing Mark Calloway? Was it as Mean Mark, or was it later down the line?
It was definitely Mean Mark. And myself and Jeff, we loved it when he came in and became part of the Skyscrapers there at one point and was doing that deal. And we liked him a lot because he would do that deal where he'd walk down the rope and drop the elbow. So I was a fan of Mean Mark Callis in WCW.
I always pop seeing pictures of the Undertaker as a redhead, because he is a redhead, and we're so used to him dyeing his hair jet black throughout the years. But Mean Mark, he looked like such a baby. But he was so tall and he was gigantic, like you said, part of the Skyscrapers. Did he ever strike you as somebody that could be a bigger deal at that juncture?
We thought he definitely had the potential to be a star. I mean, I remember thinking like, oh man, this guy's cool. And not only is he super tall and super big, but he's also very agile, especially the way he would walk the ropes and whatnot. So we dug him. I was a fan of Mean Mark Callis.
Did big men in that period have any sort of stigma that you have to work a certain way, you have to move like this, you have to sell like this, or not even sell at all? Because like you just said, he's walking the ropes, he's doing different things. It's not something you're typically seeing in that era.
Yes. And I'm sure that stigma probably worked against him a little bit in some of the things he was wanting to try. You know, once again, it's that same old scenario of there's the young rookies who come in and they're trying to change the business. They're trying to change the game. Like, look, kid, just do it the right way. You're a big guy. You take a shoulder tackle. You take a step back. Another shoulder tackle. You take 2 steps back. And the third one, you mow the guy down. That's how a big man works, brother. But he was wanting to switch it up a little bit and inject some of his athleticism in it. And I'm way cool with that. I thought that was awesome.
The funny thing is he's such a great athlete that, and we know he's actually a pretty big MMA fan. I think if mixed martial arts had been a thing back then, if UFC had been a thing back then, I truly believe that would have been the path that he would have pursued. We know those Undertaker strikes that he looks so hyper realistic. I really think he would have pursued a path like that. What did you think about his integration of that combat sports style into his game as a worker?
I thought it was smart. I thought it was neat, and I thought it was very smart, and it was also very with the times. So I was down with it.
Was he ever stiff with any of those strikes?
I mean, he would catch you maybe once in a while, but overall, I would say 95% of the time they were as easy as they could be. He was a very, very, very good, very, very good worker, very, very good striker.
Well, nothing's really happening for him in WCW, and he actually starts to kind of question what his future is going to be. And Ole Anderson, who is booking at the time, they're talking about a new contract, and he says that, buddy, nobody's ever going to pay to see you wrestle. You're not a draw. And at that point, he tries to contact the WWF and Vince McMahon. And he eventually lands a meeting with Vince. And he does so under the precipice that he'll only take the meeting and the interview if he gets his release from WCW. So he walks to WCW, and it's actually Paul Heyman and Bruce Pritchard that go to bat for him. And Vince was initially reluctant to hire Mark Calloway until he comes up with an idea for this character he's wanted to do for a long time, which is inspired by an Old West Undertaker. Matt, this is an enormous risk taken by Mark Calloway here. I mean, he wouldn't even take an interview behind WCW's back. He decided, I got to be full of my contractual obligations before I even talk to anybody else. What does that say about his character? Is that reflective of the man that you know, Mark Calloway?
I think so. It definitely says something about his loyalty and his character as far as trying to do things the right way.
I'd like to ask you about Bruce Pritchard and The Undertaker. Over the years, it's been said that the two of them are pretty close. Bruce Pritchard's a Texas guy. What was their relationship like throughout the years?
Yeah, I would guess they were pretty close, especially just how, Brother Love was the initial guy that was, with The Undertaker. So, I mean, I imagine if that's the first guy you work with, you're spending a lot of time with that guy, and usually you bond pretty quickly if you're spending a lot of time with someone.
Did Undertaker ever try to leverage anything politically like that? Because, again, Bruce Pritchard was probably the number 2 or 3 person in the company for a long period of time with Vince there.
I mean, in the early days, I would have no idea. But I would imagine he was pretty straightforward. He's a pretty straightforward dude that has a lot of integrity, and he believes in doing things the right way.
So Vince pitches this Old West Undertaker character to Mark Calloway. Let's take a trip back to those early 90s days. It's the land of characters in the World Wrestling Federation.
I miss those days.
Oh, do you? What'd you like so much about those days? What were you so nostalgic about with those?
I played Broken Matt Hardy, John. I love characters, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's when Jeff and I we were first getting into wrestling. Like, I dug characters. I mean, there's obviously been times where there's been some characters that have been out that have been overly cheesy or whatever, but I still think pro wrestling, at the end of the day, you can go in and have great matches, but it's also about storytelling and about the character, the character playing their role to a T, making sure the character stays, keeps his continuity, making sure he stays along his personality, what he would typically do. And I remember when The Undertaker first showed up, that was one of the pay-per-views that myself and Jeff, we were watching, and we were so excited. As soon as he came out with the hat, we said, oh my God, that's me, Mark Callis. It's so cool. Like he's with WWF and he's going to be The Undertaker. Oh my God, this guy's great. It's so cool. And just that first appearance blew us away, and we were an Undertaker fan from day one.
Who is one character that is kind of universally looked down upon or shit upon that you kind of have a guilty pleasure fixation with, like any soft spot for any of these goofy 90s characters?
I mean, I don't feel like Papa Shango is looked down upon as much as he would be, but I love Papa Shango too. I love that stuff that he did. The stuff with the Ultimate Warrior, the stuff over the top.
Yeah.
Like I was all into the entertainment aspect.
You like the little puke there, pal?
Yeah. I was good with that. Someone who I would say was a character that's probably universally looked down upon, maybe even the route they took with John Gonzalez when he was there. John Gonzalez is just the outfit was so absurd, and I remember Taker kept saying he heard him so often. It's real funny if you were ever with Taker and get him on stories about working with John Gonzalez with George. Like, as nice as he could possibly be, but he was pretty clueless, and he was also still very strong and rough, and he would constantly hurt Taker and beat him up, as Taker was like forced to work with him because he finally had someone that was bigger than him and made him look like an underdog from the size perspective.
The airbrushed abs weren't your vibe?
It was more of the hairy shoulders, probably more than anything else. The hairy shoulder pads. Very odd. I remember we're like, oh my God, Jeff and I actually had the opposite reaction, I feel like, when John Gonzalez showed up. He was like, oh my God, that's Dante. Let's see
Oh, that's so great. I love that. So you just mentioned Taker debut, Survivor Series 1990. It's kind of one of those more iconic debuts in wrestling history. Commentary's putting him over as this menace. He's walking stoically to the ring with Brother Love at his side. You guys were just totally fixated. I feel like Jeff, with how exotic Jeff is, he probably was all about a dead man kind of character, right?
Absolutely, yeah. He was all about the dead man character. He loved the Taker stuff.
What did you think about the incorporation of the storytelling elements of the Undertaker character in his matches, like where he would walk near a referee and the referee would run, or he would no-sell something, or if someone didn't sell enough for him, there would be some blowback? Like, what do you think of that incorporation?
I mean, I loved it all. And I like the fact that he was more or less, they put him out there like he's this zombie. He's this living zombie, that is like indestructible. And whenever he would walk down the referee and the referee would run off, it was just, once again, like if you see a zombie coming at you, you're going to haul ass. So, I mean, I feel like that was all great character building and what they were doing. And it was great that they built up that character. But with that being said, a personality like that, a character like that only has a certain shelf life to be able to do that without having to evolve or change and be something different, which ultimately we all know that he did.
Is that first iteration of The Undertaker the most memorable for you?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Especially being a very impressionable child digging pro wrestling. And like, once again, the jumps, like when we saw guys, go from WWF to WCW, that was a big deal. When we saw guys come from WCW to WWF, that was a huge deal. And I remember the Undertaker was like a big jump, and it was sad when we lost that in the pro wrestling business. So it's pretty cool that there's deals now like the whole Cody deal. That's like the first jump that I feel like has been such a big deal in such a long time. And then we've had guys that have left WWF and come to AEW, or left WWE. I got to talk about the modern day version, WWE, and come to AEW. And I think it's very cool. I think this is very exciting for pro wrestling fans, and it's also very good for business.
Let's talk a little bit about Paul Bearer, because if you're discussing the presentation of the Undertaker character, you have to discuss Paul Bearer.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about Percy Pringle, Bill Moody here, that people should definitely know about, and what he did to enhance Undertaker's presentation?
I mean, once again, he was all in on the gig, and I would imagine when he was first presented with that, he was probably, "Ooh, this is a lot," the makeup, everything else. But he was fully committed to the gig, and that's what's so important in getting it over. Whether it's a broken mat or an Orange Cassidy or whatever it may be, you have to commit to the gig. And Paul Bearer committed 100%. He's a guy who loved pro wrestling. He was a big ribber. He was a guy that just liked to have fun with the boys. But Paul Bearer was also someone who's very committed to his gig in pro wrestling.
What did you make of the pairing of the two of them? Why did they work so well together?
I mean, once again, you've got the guy holding the urn that kind of controls the zombie, and they both look so weird. They both look so strange. They're both larger than life characters over the top. So yeah, they just fit like a hand in a glove, man. They work perfectly together, and they were also buddies too.
Yeah, they got real close together.
Yeah.
I think that Paul Bearer being with The Undertaker elevated him to an entirely different level.
Yes.
And it allowed for Taker to have more personal feuds with some of his opponents, because with him being so stoic and zombie-like at that juncture, there's not really an opportunity for him to show vulnerability as a character. There's not opportunities for him to take shots as a character at somebody else. So when you have someone like Paul Bearer there, who also, look, Paul Bearer had a very punchable face, you want to see that payback come. I think it just helped elevated Taker to that entirely different level. Did you have a favorite opponent of The Undertaker from that era? He was very close with Yoko for a period of time.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, that was his crew. People talk about BSK. That's Yoko and the Godwins and Rikishi and Godfather. They were thick as thieves at all times. And I remember when we first came to do enhancement work at WWE. I remember the first time we saw Undertaker walk in. He literally walked in with his hat. He had on these black ass shades. He had on all black and had a long black trench coat. Not his gimmick coat, but a regular trench coat. And we heard them talking about how they'd been out real late the last night and it'd been a big party night or whatever. But he came in looking like such a gangster. Like, holy shit, this guy's like, he's fucking the legit deal. He's really cool, and he's rocking the look. And he acted very stoic, and he was very quiet. And he very much maintained his presence around outsiders, I guess, so to say. Probably he would cut loose if he was just in a locker room with all the regular talent that's on the roster. But like if he would come around at TV and there were TV people there were extras there, he kind of stayed in gimmick more than most people would then.
You said BSK, that being the Bone Street Crew, for those who might be unfamiliar. What can you tell us about the Bone Street Crew? You just rattled off the people who were in it. What was that all about? How did they carry themselves as a unit together? Was it a little too cliquey? Were people allowed to interact with them? What was that like? Because I feel like they're kind of wrestling folklore.
Yeah, I mean, people obviously interacted with them, but I mean, it was their crew, and I feel like they hung out outside of the wrestling space more than anything else because they kind of shared a lot of commonalities. once again, there were some factions at that time. Legitimately, there was the BSK, there was the Clique at that time, which was Sean and Hunter, and it's a little bit later, but Sean and Hunter, Razor, Kid, they all hung together. But I mean, that was just their crew that hung together outside of wrestling more than anything else. And I would imagine they just had each other's backs if they were trying to do things. I mean, that's probably why, those guys had so many different opportunities to do different things, as time went on. You had, Papa Shango, return is Kama the Street Fighter, and then he did, Goodfather and Godfather and everything else, but anyway, they were boys with Taker. So if Taker was there, then that definitely opened up the door for them all to come back, I would say, and do things in different eras.
I was about to say, so it pays to have friends in high places in that case.
It does, especially in those days. It's changed some over the years, but it still does. It's good to know people in high places. Yes.
Yeah. Well, they're a crew. They're going out after shows. They're grabbing drinks. They're grabbing food. And chances are, Matt Hardy, if BSK was still rolling together today, they'd be headed to Jimmy's Famous Seafood after a show in Baltimore, because that is the place to be, is it not?
I said, that.
Jimmy's Famous Seafood is not just available for those of you in Baltimore, of course, because it's available nationwide via jimmysfamousseafood.com, and you can get free 2-day nationwide shipping now on orders over $125, excluding steamed crabs and fresh items, by using the promo code HARDY. We're talking crab cakes, soups, chowders, oysters, signature steaks, desserts, gluten-free items, and their famous gift boxes that can give you every which way combination that you desire. Matt Hardy, this is Super Bowl Sunday coming up. Why not spend that little extra cash that you got there on the tailgate bundle with 2 pounds of wings, a full rack of ribs, pint of crab dip, crab cake mix? This is the place to be for Super Bowl Sunday, is it not?
There is no better way to celebrate your Super Bowl Sunday than by having Jimmy's Famous Seafood. Jimmy's delectable, it's delicious Famous Seafood. It is the best thing you can get, and you can order and you can have it there at your place for the Super Bowl. So you better jump on it now.
Imagine this. You're a Kansas City fan. Patrick Mahomes is fourth quarter, just 2 minutes to play in the game. It's a 3-point game. Patrick Mahomes driving Kansas City down the field. You'd be nervous, but you're not nervous because you got a delicious jumbo lump Maryland crab cake on your plate. Takes the nerves off, just brings you down to the serotonin boost that you need. This is what you want. Go to jimmysfamousseafood.com. Use that promo code HARDY and get yours today. They are a company with over 40 years in business. They've been featured on Triple D, Beat Bobby Flay. These are the best chefs in the world, putting over Jimmy's Famous Seafood, and so is Matt Hardy. Matt, what's your favorite item from Jimmy's Famous Seafood? Are those crab cakes?
It's the crab cakes. And I'm going to tell you, I was in Baltimore just this last weekend.
Yes, you were.
And I actually sent a runner out to get those. I didn't have time. My weekend was so packed. I was in and out, but I was so packed. I was so busy. My schedule was insane. I sent a runner out to get those crab cakes, and I got crab cakes and some sushi, and I engulfed them. They were so good.
So jealous of that, but I'll just have to order some for myself. jimmysfamousseafood.com, promo code HARDY.
Yes.
Any guesses there on the Super Bowl? I know you're not super in tune with that, but Kansas City, Philadelphia, you want to piss off some of our fans here or make a pick for everyone?
I'm neither one of those teams are my teams. I would say I'm going to go with Kansas City, and that's not because I like Kansas City. That's not because I dislike Philly. I'm cool with Philly as well, but I'm just going to say Kansas City. That is my pick to win the Super Bowl.
Travis Kelce, tight end for Kansas City, big-time wrestling fan. He's cutting promos all the time. He was interviewed in the post-game last week, and he said, know your role and shut your mouth in his interviews. So I think if Travis Kelce knew that Matt Hardy was endorsing Kansas City, he'd be pretty happy about that. So,
what about you, John? Who's your pick?
I think I'm going to go with Kansas City as well, but Philly is really, really good. I'm a Giants fan. I know firsthand how good the Eagles are, and Jalen Hurts. I could see either team winning here. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce's brother, plays for the Eagles. So
that's a cool stat.
Yeah, it's cool. So they're going to be checking that out. So we'll see who comes out on top. The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. Maybe it's because we got the red and white colors there. We're going to Kansas City here.
Maybe subliminally we just see Kansas City Chiefs.
Who's your NFL team? Is it the Falcons?
I mean, it's got to be the Carolina Panthers
You're
now.
going. I didn't know because the Panthers came along a little later in life for you, so I wasn't sure if that was what you grew up on.
Yeah, earlier on back in the day, I mean, a lot of times it was the Falcons or the Washington Redskins when they used to be the Redskins. So those were the two teams that we typically would root for in our area. But once Carolina came along, it was hard not to be a fan of a local team.
More than makes sense. They've had a few glimpses of success over the years too. So okay, all right, I feel you on that. So I want to circle back here. You're talking about BSK and having friends in high places. What was Taker's dynamic like with Vince in those early days when you guys are doing the enhancement jobs? Did you ever have any impression of what his relationship was like with Vince?
He's always had Vince's ear. So if he wanted a one-on-one direct sit down with Vince, he got it immediately. He was always, from the line. Those days, when there was Undertaker, there was Bret Hart, there was Shawn Michaels, especially at the time we were coming around. Those were the top guys that Vince held in the highest regards. And if they wanted any FaceTime or if they wanted to talk to Vince about anything, they could definitely get his ear.
Why do you think Vince respected Taker so much?
I just feel like he gave Taker a pretty over-the-top character and gig. Taker ran with it. And, I'm sure Vince was trying to put him in situations to succeed, but it also takes the performer to actually make that character succeed and to make the angles and the matches succeed. And Taker did that. And he became a huge attraction for WWE. And once you become a huge attraction for WWE, I mean, Vince is going to be very respectful of you, and he's going to also show you loyalty as well.
In 1994, July 3rd specifically, it's a Superstars taping in Maryland, which I know that you were already about Jimmy's Famous Seafood at that time. You're facing Brian Lee, the Undertaker, and your build is Brian Hardy here. Was this your first interaction with Mark Calloway? I know he's not in the match, but what do you remember about that night?
Yeah, that was probably my first in-depth interaction with him. He was very hands-on, so he was going to be facing, and everyone called him Undertaker. That was just like his name at that time. So Undertaker was going to be facing Undertaker at SummerSlam. And Taker took a lot of pride in making this be as good as he possibly can. And I think that's something he's always done in pro wrestling. He takes a lot of pride and a lot of initiative in trying to make his programs and stories and matches be as good as they can possibly be. So he was the one that produced that match more than anybody else. We didn't have Tony Gurria or Rene Goulet, the guys who were the typical producers, the agents at that time. No Jack Lanza. Taker kind of handled that. And he just said, no, whenever you grab him, I want you to whip your hair like this. And, your cadence should be like this when you do it. And when you come off the ropes, this is your cadence. He was very hands-on, and he wanted him to be as authentic as possible so that, wow, this guy is like a mirror image of The Undertaker, to try and build up their match and have people be interested in it.
Because that SummerSlam match, everyone knew it was a ridiculous story, but it had to have some degree of credibility for anyone to give a shit about it.
Sure.
So by treating that, hey, you got to do things that way, I think that shows and speaks to the investment that he had in his own character. How protective was he over the years of the Undertaker character?
Extremely protective. And I think it is important to be protective of your character and kind of your personality, protective of your moves. I've probably been too selfish over the years. Yeah. People will get in a match with me, especially if I'm a heel, they go, "Oh my God, could I hit the twist of fate on you? I mean, just tell me you don't want to do it." I said, "No, I'm cool with that. Do it. It'll be great." But Taker he was very, very protective of his character. He was protective of his moveset, and he was protective of what guys could and couldn't do to him.
To a fault, perhaps?
Well, I don't know if you can really say it is to a fault, because obviously the Undertaker persona worked and it was over huge. So I mean, there is definitely a time to protect yourself and to tell people no, where it might seem like you're being a dick, but sometimes it is the right thing to do.
I know that a lot of guys over the years would take pride in trying to pop him and trying to get him to break character a little bit. There's that famous clip of a post Raw where Booker T was trying to get everyone to do spinneroonies, and He
Yes.
tried to get Undertaker in there, and Taker went like he was about to do it, and they just powdered out instead of actually doing it. Was there anyone in particular that really tried to push his buttons? I imagine perhaps our friend John Bradshaw Layfield might have been in that group of people.
Maybe. John was more or less like his enforcer over the
Okay.
years. I feel
His
like,
bailiff.
yeah, if someone did something wrong, then he was the head of the mafia. That was the Undertaker, and then his right hand man, the enforcer, was JBL.
Okay, well, we'll revisit that in just a minute here because there's certainly something to dig into. In 1997, we see the introduction of Kane, who, after months of build, is brought in as Taker's brother at Bad Blood 97.
Right.
This was the first pro wrestling pay-per-view I ever watched, and it was the night that got me hooked on pro wrestling.
There you have it.
One of the most memorable debuts ever. And even though they're fake brothers, I'd imagine to some degree that this story really resonated with you. In your opinion, where does the Taker Kane arc rank in terms of greatest wrestling storylines ever?
It's up there. I mean, it's a special story, especially because it went on for so long. Those guys started there, and they totally maintained the entirety of their careers at WWE with those two characters, which is a big deal, especially when you're able to tell that story for like 20 years and be off and on brothers. So yeah, it's a big deal and one of the greatest story arcs in WWE.
And it's genuinely like, take yourself within the realm of kayfabe for a second. It's genuinely believable to do. You could buy that they're brothers, right? They look like they could be brothers. And I think that added to the hyper realism of all the spookiness and the silliness that would come with them. But you do run the risk too of it maybe becoming a little bit gimmicky with the lightning, and as he really ventures into the Ministry of Darkness stuff, like he basically becomes a cult leader. Did they push the button a little too much with Taker, and we got into the later '90s and the heat of the Attitude Era? In your opinion?
I don't think so.
No.
But once again, this is going to be very subjective. I'm down with that character stuff, and I highly enjoy the character aspect of pro wrestling. I wish it lived more nowadays. It's still around, but it's just nowhere near as accepted as it used to be.
What'd you make of the Ministry of Darkness stuff? I know some of your friends were involved in that angle, and his presentation became a lot more brooding and dark. And it kind of seemed like that was the furthest they could really take Taker at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. It was I feel like at the end of the day, when Vince McMahon ended up being the big reveal, that was a little disappointing because I wanted someone super creepy, worse than Undertaker, to be like the guy who's the mastermind behind all this. But I love Taker's look, and I feel like him being the cult leader. The thing they did like with Steve, where they put him on the Undertaker sign, which was kind of representative of a cross. I just thought all that stuff was very cool. Really interesting imagery.
Have you ever heard the rumor of who was supposed to be the higher power?
I've heard what you've told me.
Yes, Christopher
and
Daniels.
I might have to sit CD down and
Yeah.
find out the legitimacy of that.
Can we find out if that's Matt Fact or Matt Fiction?
Yeah, I would like to.
Okay.
That sounds very hard for me to believe in our reality. But maybe I'll try and get to the bottom of this, and I'll have an answer next week.
Put on your Gregory Helms reporter cap.
Yes.
Get us some
my
answers.
magnifying glass.
Yes, get us some answers here, because I would love to know if that is in fact Matt Fact or Matt Fiction. You would break the internet if you got down to the answer of that. So,
yeah,
see what you could do here.
I'll work on that.
So then, after he suffers an injury in '99, he disappears for a while, and he decides it's time for a reinvention, and we get the re-debut of the Undertaker as the American Badass. What'd you think of his transformation into the American Badass, and what did that reinvention do for his career?
I dug it. I liked it. It was very different at first, but it grew on me very, very quickly. And I think more than anything else, he became a very good talker and speaker as a character. And I feel like he was very limited doing the original Undertaker role. So I know, even working with him and speaking to him, he was much happier. He was able to show his personality, and he was able to do normalized promos as opposed to just doing the very cold zombie rest in peace. He loved to go out and like cut good promos, and he felt like his promo cutting ability would allow him to make more money and even build more new interest for this character, especially with other high level opponents.
It was a really surprising development for a lot of people because I even remember as a kid having friends who must have had access to older siblings with like the dirt sheets and whatnot being like,
Right.
oh yeah, I heard he's going to retire. Like he's beat up, he's hurt. And I remember even in hindsight going back and looking at interviews where he's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to make it past 35 in this industry. Was there ever chatter in the locker room that, old Taker's hanging it up this year?
No,
Nope.
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like that's a smart working approach anyway, just to keep a little sympathy, keep people wanting to come back and watch you. And they, I think it's very important that there's this feeling where they're almost like, if they hear those rumors, they're like crestfallen. They're sad. They're like, oh my God, I hope Taker doesn't hang it up. I love seeing the Taker. I want to see him just for another year. I think there is a little something to that. I'm not saying that's what he did intentionally. I'm sure he was beat up, as many people I know. I'm beat the fuck up, but once again, like I don't really have it marked down for any certain time that I'm going to specifically retire or stop doing active in-ring competition.
Sure. Well, we'll get into it in a little bit, but it does eventually become a running gag. Is Taker retiring this year? Yeah. Is this the end for the Undertaker?
Back then, it wasn't though.
Yeah. He also changes up his finisher from the Tombstone to the Last Ride.
Smart move.
I was watching something in preparation for this show that I'll talk about in a few minutes here, where you just took a vicious Last Ride. Which move are you rather taking, a Last Ride or a Tombstone?
Tombstone.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, 100%. And during that time, you're talking about being very protective of his character. That fell along the lines of when Jeff had his big ladder match with him, right? As that build was going down, where they did the deal where I want to say Jeff like drop kicked him into a bucket of puke that Tommy Dreamer had there, was part of the angle as that was being built. And I remember they were talking about different things to get to this match, this ladder match eventually. And I know Jeff pitched the angle to Michael Hayes, which pitched it to Taker before even going to Vince, of having the old school Undertaker music play, and Jeff came out dressed as the old school Undertaker with like the hat and the robe and wanted to do the whole hand thing and try and roll his eyes back in his head. And I remember Taker said, no, I don't want anybody to do that because I'm sure I'm going to go back to that one day. So he was very protective of that. He said,
well, he had the foresight that he could revisit that.
Yeah, I mean, he knew that he would be able to, and he knew that he would. So that's a case of him showing protection over his, over his character, over his IP, and not letting anybody else do it, so that it seems super sacred, and it means that much more when he goes back to doing it.
Well, we told a very fun story about Michael Hayes, speaking of which, on this podcast in episode 3 or 4 about, I think it was episode 4 about Michael Hayes, and that's available in the archives, extremehardy.com. Him being a significant part of your appearance in Wrestler's Court, where the Undertaker is the judge in Wrestler's Court, and as you said, JBL kind of the prosecutor. That's a great story. Go check that out in the archives. Do you ever remember any other super memorable Wrestler's Court stories involving the Undertaker? That was a popular question from a lot of our fans here.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, there were some very popular ones. One of the ones that I remember, there was a time where Melina went to court, and she was like the first girl that ever went to a wrestler's court. And ended up being a pretty emotional moment. One of my favorite wrestler's court was the one that we've talked about a little bit here with Edge and Christian and Brian Goretz. And I feel like that's when we should say that full story for when Brian actually does the pod. I know we've talked about doing that. Hopefully we'll do that down the road very soon. But that was a good one as well. It was a heavily entertaining wrestler's court also. All the time, people in AEW go, hey, man, you got to bring Wrestler's Court back. I know you've been in a few of them, so like, maybe we'll make you the judge. But we got to bring this back in the business, to police the locker room.
Yeah, there's definitely like a negative stigma to it for sure. Like, I mean, you just said the Molino. Can you give us any details about that Molino one, or is that something locked away in the vaults?
Yeah, that one's probably kind of locked away in the vault. Okay. It was a pretty brutal one.
I gotcha. Well, that you just said, it's kind of a little brutal. So I do think at times it maybe got a little too heavy-handed, but there probably is a way where you could revitalize an idea like that and do it in jest and have fun with it.
I mean, I think it was created for younger talent, especially that hadn't been around the business, never did the territory stuff, that didn't come in with that ultimate respect, that you were supposed to have at the business during that time and around that era. And it was just like a way to teach them a lesson in a very entertaining way, and kind of also pop the boys while doing it. I feel like that's kind of what wrestling court, and the majority of the time it was done usually like in fun, to just kind of try and teach someone a lesson. Even at the end of ours, they're just like, hey, we know this was Michael Hayes, not you guys. Don't sweat it. Just roll with it. We're going to really get Michael in this one for setting a bad example or setting a bad precedent for what he did to you guys. So yeah, it was usually very much in fun, but there were some times where things would take a turn and get a little bit brutal.
So hypothetically, if AEW had Wrestlers Court, who's the judge, who's the prosecutor, who's the defendant, and who's the bailiff?
That'd be interesting. I feel like the person that would be the highest on the totem pole, that would almost be the judge, would be Chris Jericho.
I would agree.
I feel like I would probably be the prosecutor. I'd play the role of JBL. I've got his lines down and everything. And then it depends. They would have other guys fill in little small roles, but that'd be my guess for the judge and for the prosecutor.
Samoa Joe's got to be the bailiff, right?
He would be good, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's got to be the bailiff there. Well, hell, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, you've been running your mouth out there on social media. I could see it. Matt Hardy. Just saying. Yeah. So what was the way of getting out of Wrestlers Court in terms of bribing the judge?
Just buy him a bottle of Jack Daniels, maybe two. It was a pretty easy solution. You would literally go in, you would have your trial. They would do your thing, go through the case, tell you what you did wrong, give you whatever your sentence was. And then usually if you would give the Undertaker a bottle of Jack towards the end, he would lighten the sentence and hopefully everybody would leave with a smile on their face.
Well, these days you wouldn't be buying a bottle of Jack Daniels to pay off the judge. You'd be buying your Athletic Greens AG1 to make sure that you are getting out of Wrestlers Court, because everyone wants to be healthy, Matt Hardy.
You're going green, baby.
Exactly. You're going green, and that's what we're doing with AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. It's a special blend of ingredients supporting your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy recovery focus, and aging. This, you just combine it with water. I wouldn't recommend combining AG1 with Jack Daniels. I feel like that would probably not be the best tasting AG1 you've ever had, but it would still be lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, artificial anything, while still tasting good and supporting mental clarity and alertness. Listen, tons of people take some kind of multivitamin. It's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. AG1 is a small micro habit with big-time benefits. It's one thing you can do every single day to take great care of yourself. That would certainly get you off of a rough sentence in Wrestlers Court, would it not?
It would. And I was just going to say, this was my AG1's bottle this morning. That's the first thing I did before I hit the gym. I had my AG1s, man, and I got my day started right.
And it got you out of a rough sentence there from Ethan Page, because I know that he wasn't too happy about that Trio's loss to the Elite at the end of the day.
Yeah, I got a little gift for him today. I think I'm going to smooth everything over.
I heard
it may or may not be a bottle of Jack Daniels, but it probably is. I don't know if he's a big drinker.
I heard that he hogged the elliptical today.
Of course. I mean, that's what he does. He's always still in the spotlight. You see that? I come in, ho, and he gets up on the second rope, and I just stand there with him watching in amazement. And he waited too long. He ate a super kick.
Well, he should be drinking his AG1s instead of eating super kicks. And right now it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just 1 scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different supplements and pills to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D. Yes. And how many free travel packs, Matt Hardy?
5, 5.
All you got to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Hardy. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/Hardy to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And we thank them for sponsoring this podcast.
Hey guys, it's the hardcore legend Mick Foley here, and I need to call a quick timeout, a brief timeout, because I wanted to tell your listeners what I have been telling Foley is Pod listeners for a while now about all the cool things happening over on adfreeshows.com.
The road to WrestleMania has begun, and in this ad-free show's exclusive, Tony and JR sit down to call the action from some of WrestleMania's biggest matches, including the end of The Undertaker's streak.
Hard-hitting war. I thought that Taker kicked out. I was wrong. And maybe that's because of my prejudice that I wanted to see Taker win.
Yeah, I would have liked to see 22-0 as well. But this is a historic moment. It really is, not only in WrestleMania history, but in all of pro wrestling, if you think about it.
What does everybody want? How about a sit-down exclusive with Al Snow, who discusses a wide range of topics, including his dear friend, Jim Cornette.
Jimmy knows and understands his gimmick, and he knows and understands what draws for him. And like any good worker, Jimmy's going to capitalize on it, and a lot of what you see is not Jim Cornette. It's an aspect of Jim Cornette, and it's just an aspect that Jimmy's turned the volume up on, apparently, as the years went on, a lot.
Ad-free show members recently sat shotgun alongside Kevin Nash for a live watch-along of his WWE Championship match against Shawn Michaels at In Your House 7. Catch the event now on demand.
Bullet. A year of brutal matches
was too much for the big man.
Too much for the big man's shoulders as he continually reached those shoulders into his pockets and came out empty from the amount of money that was paid him.
That's just a small taste, a sampling, if you will, of what we have waiting for you. With 4 levels to choose from. 4. See for yourself why ad-free shows is the best value in wrestling today. Sign up now, right now, at adfreeshows.com. Yeah.
Let's get more into your one-on-one interactions with him. On April 23rd, 2001, it's Raw. You and Jeff team with the Brothers of Destruction against the two-man Power Trip and Edge and Christian. We're going to be talking about the two-man Power Trip in just a couple months here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. But what did that night mean for you guys? I mean, you're firmly in there with bona fide main event stars.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. It was a huge rub for both myself, Jeff, and Edge and Christian as teams in there doing our thing. And it was very cool that, our stories kind of intersected in that way. The whole deal, we'll go into this in the two-man Power Trip episode, but, that was just supposed to be a one-night thing, and it ended up turning into a little program where Jeff won the Intercontinental title, and we had some matches with Stone Cold and Triple H. So it was very, very cool. But just having that 8-man tag match really solidified, like, guys, we're making it. We're doing the right thing, and we're here wrestling with these legitimate legends, these legitimate main eventers, and we're in the main event of a show right now, rocking and rolling.
Out of curiosity, is he soliciting you guys for any ideas in a match like that, or is it the veterans taking the call on this and you guys just follow along?
I mean, a lot of times in a match like that, it would be where they kind of have their framework. They're going to do what they do. And then they would add us to like supplement it by putting some Hardys or some ENC in it. That's kind of how those things work. And
you found there was a lot of good give and take putting that together?
Yeah. I mean, they were pretty open to stuff. And, there'd be some things that obviously they change, they didn't work the exact same style that we did, but we would be able to incorporate enough of our stuff where it seemed like, okay, there is Hardys in this match and there is Edge and Christian in this match, and we're seeing their content as well. They were definitely smart enough to allow us to do that so that someone who's watching the match for these new young up-and-coming teams, they're getting to see what they want to see from them.
Well, in December, he has turned heel after the Invasion angle, and he's actually the hardcore champion. They're kind of taking a more grittier approach with the Undertaker character that's leading into the big evil evolution. This is a very memorable incarnation of the Undertaker character for me, Big Evil, and they're really leaning into him being the established veteran on the WWE roster. He calls the ring his yard, his doghouse. You end up in a one-on-one match with him for the Hardcore Championship on a SmackDown in December of that year. It's your first singles match with the Undertaker. Do you have any memories of that?
Yeah, I remember being excited for that match. It's a guy that I legitimately watched like growing up as a fan. So like the times when you get in rings of guys that like were your heroes growing up is always a big deal. And it's crazy because I get that a lot now with some of the young guys that I wrestle against. So that was really cool. And I was really nervous. And I wanted to do real good for him. And I wanted to make it into a great match. But it also was very cool. It's like nervous, I think, when you work against someone like that. But it's also like a great compliment of that you have risen to a level and you are a legitimate star and you can work with someone like this and be seen as credible with them.
What did you think of them leaning into some of that reality where he is the guy backstage and everything goes through the Undertaker?
I mean, I thought it was good. It was very reality based, and wrestling was changing around this time. The internet is becoming more and more of a breeding ground of information, especially for pro wrestling. So yeah, I thought that was an okay route to take with him.
Well, you and Jeff start to mix it up with him leading into the Royal Rumble in 2002.
Right.
And this brings us to one of the biggest moments in Royal Rumble history, where after he eliminates you guys, he pushes Lita off the apron, and that pisses you guys off, so you come back and attack him. And Maven from Tough Enough is in the ring. He just freshly won Tough Enough. And as the Undertaker is distracted trying to clear you guys out, and he's yelling at you guys, Maven dropkicks him and eliminates the Undertaker in what is probably the biggest Royal Rumble elimination ever. It's one of the biggest pops that you'll ever hear in a Royal Rumble match.
The biggest upset elimination ever.
Certainly. Take us through that day. What was that moment like being on the outside, hearing the crowd react like that? How did it all come together?
I would imagine Vince probably had to work pretty hard to sell Undertaker on that. I can't imagine he volunteered to do it. But I know that the Tough Enough show had done pretty good ratings and had some pretty good buzz around it. And I know Vince wanted to instill more equity into Tough Enough so he could continue to do that over and over. And like with Maven coming and being the winner, he wanted to have a really special moment. So people were like, wow, these Tough Enough guys, they're really going to end up amounting to something. They're going to become superstars on their own so that hopefully he could do more Tough Enoughs in the future. I would guess that was his mindset behind it. It was more or less like an investment into the equity of Tough Enough, having the winner of the show eliminate Undertaker. And it was done in a pretty creative way where it didn't hurt Undertaker. It just ended up being a really shocking moment. And I thought it was done pretty well.
What do you remember about that pop in on the outside? Because it's huge. I watched it back just last night.
Yeah, it was. It was huge. It was very surprising. It was very unpredictable. And once again, I say this all the time, I feel like pro wrestling is at its best when it's unpredictable. And that was certainly a big upset of an elimination. And that was a very unpredictable moment that no one would have ever called or no one would have ever expected happening.
Well, that summer, he would give Jeff the ultimate endorsement with their ladder match on Raw. We covered it in the archives, extremehardy.com. It's one of my favorite episodes we've done together. And we watched the ladder match back. As an outsider, how did you feel about the job that Taker did with Jeff and helping elevate him?
Once again, much like when I was talking earlier about the match he had with the Undertaker, how he really put his heart into it and he wanted it to work out and be as good as possible. He wanted the characters to play their role as good as possible. He wanted the story to be as believable as possible. And he did the same thing with this match with Jeff. I know Taker was very nervous. I mean, that came from Michael Hayes. He said he was very nervous about this match, and it was very important to his legacy that he wanted this match to be good. So he was very hands-on. I remember being out at ringside, kind of throwing ideas out, like we were all kind of brainstorming about creative ways to do stuff and different things that haven't been done yet in a ladder match setting. So it was very important to him and his legacy to make this ladder match great, because he didn't want to be seen as the big guy who can't hang with this ladder match guy. He definitely wanted to hang with him and tell a good story and make that match great. And obviously he did, because that is one of Jeff's most famous matches of all time.
And it's also used as a pretty big catalyst in storytelling, where that endorsement he gives at the end of the match is kind of the beginning of the babyface turn that we're starting to see here with The Undertaker. And he has the Cena endorsement that we talked about a few weeks ago too. Yeah. And eventually that leads to him becoming a babyface into the fall of 2002, which is perfect because someone else turns heel around the fall of 2002, one Matt Hardy. And we see the development of the V1 character where you infamously defeat him twice. What did he think of what you were trying to accomplish with the new gimmick, to your understanding, and how instrumental was he in helping you get that over as a legitimate thing?
He was very open to it. I mean, there were several times he told me he was very proud of the work I had done, and also the effort I'd put into distancing myself from being just an adrenaline junkie, one half of the Hardy Boys, doing something different, like taking on another identity, reinventing myself, evolving. So he was very, he was very kind to me when it came to that. He was very complimentary. And then even getting to work with him was once again so cool. I knew him more at this time, so it was a lot more comforting, a lot easier. And it was really enjoyable. And it did. It really helped put a lot of equity into Matt Hardy version 1, because now you're wrestling like, the top wrestler on the roster, and you're having, half-ass competitive matches against him, and you're like picking up some wins, even if they are by, a shitty heel way. And it helped me out so much. And I'm very grateful that he worked with me and he was willing to work with me.
So 2003 rolls on, another injury puts him on the shelf, and he decides that once again, it is time to reinvent. And as you alluded to earlier, he kind of knew in the back of his head that he could go back to the dead man character if he really, truly wanted to. And at WrestleMania 20, he debuts this new hybrid version of The Undertaker. And it's kind of somewhat a little big evil still, but also the dead man. It is truly more like a Western, like a Hollywood Western version of him. He's a little more clean. What did you think of his re-debut at WrestleMania 20 and this presentation of it that we saw?
It was cool. And obviously it brought back great childhood memories of watching the original debut of The Undertaker, although it was updated a little bit and changed a little bit, which is something you kind of have to do as time goes on. But I thought it was a really good call, and it was great timing to go back to being that version of The Undertaker.
And the beauty of it, Matt, as I said to you, he's kind of cleaned up his look a little bit here than the typical scraggly dead man character. The reason he was able to do that is because of the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit, courtesy of Manscaped. I know The Undertaker had that in his back pocket. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using code Hardy for 20% off and free shipping. Listen, man, I know you saw several different iterations of The Undertaker, long hair, short hair. That's a lot of grooming, is it not?
It is. And I'll tell you what, his Manscaped products, they never leave his bad. They're always there, especially someone who's changing their hairstyle on the reg.
I find it funny. There were those comments a few years ago that went viral where Taker was like, back in the day, we didn't have video games in our bags. We had some other things in our bags. Well, I can tell you one of those things that The Undertaker had in his bags was, of course, his Mower of Lawns 4.0, but also he had these Beard Hedger products that are just crushing it right now. The Beard Hedger is the juggernaut of fixing faces. First off, this cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel. It gives you 20 positions of precision, all with one guard. So no more messy drawers full of extra add-ons. It's face grooming that doesn't need to be hard. You get 20 different lengths in just one guard, and it's waterproof, so you can shave in the shower to avoid all that hair in the sink. The blade is tough on hair, but smooth on your face, leading to single-stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction, one stroke at a time. And there's also the beard shampoo and conditioner. You need to remember, all your hair is different, Matt Hardy, and it was different over the course of The Undertaker's career. Your beard hair is more coarse, perhaps, and easier to damage than the hair on your head. That's why this kit has made shampoo and conditioner specifically designed to moisturize, reduce ingrown hairs, replace natural oils, and promote beard health, whether you are Big Red Mark Calloway or that jet black dyed hair as well. He was always looking good, wasn't he?
He was always looking sharp, man.
Thankfully, he had Manscaped at his side. You can, too. Get 20% off your order and free shipping with code Hardy at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use that code Hardy. Manscaped Beard Hedger, one stroke, one guard, 20 lengths. I know yours just arrived at the house, Hardy, and I can see you're not letting the beard get too out of shape. It's looking nice and groomed.
Yeah.
Touch of gray. The Beard Hedger doing its job there for you, Matt?
I have been keeping it very trim, and it has worked out for me. It is definitely doing the job. And, it's one of those points where, We're not sure if Broken Matt, is it coming back? Is it not? Whatever. But, as of right now, I'm staying crisp and clean, and they're doing the job perfectly. Thank you, Manscaped.
Queen Rebecca like the facial hair, or she prefer smooth as a baby's bottom?
Yeah, I think she's good with facial hair, yeah.
If you wanted to go smooth as a baby's bottom, thankfully, because of the 20 different lengths, you certainly could. Manscaped.com, use that promo code Hardy, and we thank them for sponsoring this podcast. So he is peak spookiness in 2005.
Right.
Vince is leaning in. We're getting the lightning popping out of caskets, all this stuff. He's feuding with Randy Orton throughout the year. And around this time, WrestleMania 2005, they start making note that The Undertaker hasn't lost at WrestleMania ever. The streak becomes a thing. And now all of a sudden it starts to become a story that I want to be the one to defeat the streak. What'd you make of them incorporating that into his character?
It was great. I mean, even if they stumbled upon it, which they probably did in the beginning, just that, that happened to be the deal that Undertaker just never lost at WrestleMania. But once they stumbled upon that and they made it into something, the streak had this huge equity. I mean, you knew like you're going to have this world title match is going to be a huge deal at WrestleMania, but also you're going to have WrestleMania featuring the Undertaker in a streak on the line. And that became like a huge selling point at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I feel like that was the 1B to the title matches 1A. It was just as much a draw as any world championship match.
Absolutely.
Who won the Royal Rumble? Like, if you weren't working with the world champion, well, then you better hope you're working with the Undertaker at WrestleMania, because that means your stock is still pretty high. And around Survivor Series of 2005, he makes a big return to stare down Randy Orton, and a little chaos ensues at this time, Matt Hardy. And there were some internet rumors that you caught some heat that night. What can you tell us about this particular pay-per-view?
Yeah, it's good. I've always wanted to actually speak out on this, so this is a great opportunity. So basically what had happened there, so I had just finished up my program with Edge, and the reason I ended up doing the Loser Leave Raw match that we had to blow it off is just that they wanted to have us on separate brands just at that point, so we don't have to continuously run into each other or wrestle each other, whatever, because we had like this drastic blood feud. So Vince saw that was the best solution to just kind of separate us at that time. So I go into SmackDown, and I'm still very hot. I'm doing some really cool stuff. Have a lot of momentum behind me, whatever. And then there was a couple different plans for me at Survivor Series. At one point, I was going to be on the main Survivor Series team as a babyface. And then there was a time where it also got changed, and I was going to wrestle Eddie Guerrero in a one-on-one match, which both of those would have been great matches for me and would have had a great feel to it. But it ended up, as we all know, very tragically, Eddie passed away before that. And then his death just threw a lot of stuff up in the air for that card. So things changed. I ended up not even being on the card at all. And I remember showing some frustrations. I was flying in for that pay-per-view, and I sat beside Pat Patterson and Jerry Briscoe, and we were getting off the plane. They were talking. They said, "Oh, it's okay, kid. These things happen. It is what it is. Just keep doing your thing and make sure you protect yourself. You've got a lot of equity. You've got a lot of build. You got to protect yourself and look good." So then we got there that day, and I wasn't on the card. I just thought I was going to be there hanging out, watching the show, and then I'd work the next night following the pay-per-view. But it ends up there was a list of names of people that were going to be in the ring at the end, like celebrating, and then Taker comes to the ring, and then he was going to clear some of those guys. And my name was in it. I remember I was going to Vince at that time because I had I had FaceTime with him, and I said, "Was my name meant to be on this list? Do you want me to be out there?" He said, "Well, yeah, I think it's fine because I need someone that people give a shit about out there. It's very good to have some equity out in the ring whenever Taker comes, so it doesn't just look like a bunch of extras who are just going to get beat up and take choke slams." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do out there?" He said, "Oh, well, don't he said, don't take a choke slam, don't get beat up." He said, "I just powder out. You guys figure out how you want to do it, but just powder out." He said, "I don't want you to bump." So like, okay, cool. So once again, we went out there, we did that, and I was planning on powdering out, but there was a part of me that was just so frustrated. And once again, it was my fault. I will be accountable for it. And just when Taker came out, I was like laying on the ropes, and I didn't react to him like I should have. And looking back in hindsight, I was like, what a dumb move that was. And I was just like mad because I didn't get my spot once again, which was very dumb. And it was a great lesson for me to learn. Like, if you're going to do anything, like, go all in on it. And that was a great lesson that I learned at that time. I was upset because I wasn't getting a match or a great spot on the pay-per-view that I was going to be getting. So that was like a little bit of a temper tantrum. So once again, I'm accountable for it. And I remember like nobody even really noticed it first when I jumped out, but I guess JBL like went back and saw the tape, and he got people fired up the next day at TV. And he said, "Look, we got to talk to this guy." And it was like, Taker was so mad about it. It wasn't even a wrestler sport thing and fun. I remember he came into a catering, people were around, and they played the footage back. Like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? And I just said right there, I remember he was so mad, almost like I felt like he was shaking, and I was just like, and I was at this point where I'd just been fired. I'd came back. I'd done this feud. I was almost untouchable emotionally at that point. You started to fuck with me after everything I'd been through. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, I do apologize for it. And I wish I hadn't have done it. I did it. So I'll do whatever it will take to make it right. And Marie's like, at the very end, okay, that's fine. And then for the next 2 or 3 months, there were points where I was just pretty much doing jobs. I was putting people over the majority of the time, and that was my punishment. And I'm pretty sure that's what pushed Viscera to do the deal. Like, people talk about that Royal Rumble clip where he jumped on me and he was like giving me his gimmick where he was well, once again, it was just like I was having to pay my penance, and I did it for like 3 months, and I just rolled with it. And then at the very end, there was a point where I talked with Taker, and he said, "Thank you for apologizing, we're good." And then just everything stopped.
So do you think he went to Vince and was like, "Hey, let's punish Matt a little bit here," or someone else picked up on it?
100%. Yeah. He said, we've got to teach him a lesson.
Wow.
I'm certain of that. I mean, and they're not wrong. Like, once again, it happened to me, and I'm not going to play a victim card in that. It was dumb what I did, and I went through and paid my penance, much like I did in my story in AEW last year that I was trying to tell.
Fascinating. That is really, really interesting. So you weren't supposed to take any bumps, because there are rumors that you're supposed to like take a choke slam.
Yeah,
you deliberately were told not to bump.
I mean, that specifically came from Vince, face to face. But I should have, like, when he came out of the casket, I should have sold for him and freaked out, like, oh my God, Undertaker's coming as soon as he hit the ring, then powder out. But like, I was just like very subtle and almost like laid back on the ropes and like not reacting to it. And looking back in hindsight, I look like a dickhead sitting there. So it was my fault, and I'm accountable. And that's one of the things I feel like if you learn to own stuff in life, it's a good thing to like stay very real with yourself.
But also, I also think it speaks pretty positively about him that he was able to say, okay, appreciate your apology. You paid your penance, and let's move on. Let's move forward and put it behind us. Because as you and I both know, that doesn't happen all the time in wrestling. No matter how irrational something may be, people will hold grudges over stuff that didn't even happen. And that's just something that routinely happens in wrestling.
Right.
So I think that does speak to his leadership. And would you say that he was generally universally respected from the locker room? Were there ever dissenters?
Yes. I mean, yes, there were guys who just like said, I mean, there were some guys, but once again, they didn't really, I feel like they didn't work with him, or they didn't know him well, or they didn't really understand the integrity that he had. Just like, oh man, he just thinks he's the Don, he's the mafia boss and he's untouchable. Like, I don't like him. I remember hearing some of that chatter from guys luring the card, or guys who hadn't been around that long or whatever. But those guys usually didn't end up lasting that long as it was anyway.
Sure. So 2007, 2008, 2009, I was doing some research here, and for whatever reason, you found yourself in a lot of 6-man tags,
right?
Where you're teaming with him and Batista on international shows. And it's really just international shows for the most part, against a myriad of different opponents. But for whatever reason, that was the go-to on the house show circuit for some of these shows, where it's you, Batista, and The Undertaker in these 6-man tags.
Right. What's that?
Do you know how that came together?
Well, my guess, we were 3 extremely popular baby faces at that time. So that worked from a babyface perspective. But then, like, looking back in hindsight, it was very much where Undertaker was playing the current role of Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy was playing the current role of Isaiah. You know what I mean? They put guys in there with Taker that were younger and healthy, where they could do the majority of the footwork in the match.
Gotcha. But I mean, look, Batista is super over at that time. He's big time player on both Raw and SmackDown. So you think that probably came from Taker directly to pair you guys up and work that way?
I mean, he certainly approved it. Nothing happened without his approval. So was it his idea? I don't know. But I mean, we were cool, especially after that one time where he was upset with me, and I had a couple months where I had to pay my penance after we, he saw I was being legit about everything, and we've always had a great respect for one another since then.
What did you think of his quality of work as the years went on? Because I think many would argue that his run from like 2006 to 2013, even as his body is rapidly breaking down, he's approaching 40 years old. Some would say that that's probably the best work of his entire career. What did you learn in-ring wise from him and the storytelling efforts that he put on? We're talking about these iconic matches with Shawn Michaels and Triple H and CM Punk. And what'd you make of all that?
I mean, he was a great storyteller, and he had really good points if you ever got a chance to work with him. He just really made you think of stuff from a very realistic view, and it's crazy because you think about his stuff more than anyone else hardly was very unrealistic because he was the zombie, the Undertaker, and the way he was doing that, no selling stuff and sitting up and whatever. But he also was really, really smart from a perspective of like, if you're doing something in a match, in reality, this wouldn't happen. A lot of times that would come if guys, when intergender matches were happening, he said, if you're in a match and your partner's a woman and like a guy's going to lay her hands or trying to lay her hands, like you're not going to let that happen. You're going to like stop this guy. And I remember that was something that really hit home with me when he really professed that very loudly. And I was like, God, he's so right. Like in the big scheme of things.
Well, and like that's the impetus for that 2002 Rumble spot that we just talked about, where he puts his hands on Lita and then the two of you guys just come after him. That's how you set that spot up. So I think that even relates perfectly in that sense. What do you think about the physical quality of his work as the years went on? Like I said, that like 7-year stretch, 06, 2013, he was amazing.
I thought he was great. I thought he was great during all that time.
Absolutely amazing stuff. What's your favorite match from that era of The Undertaker? He has all those iconic matches with Shawn.
The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, those two matches, especially the second one.
The second one more so, yeah?
Yeah.
The Shawn retirement match?
Yeah, Shawn was in all white, right?
That's the first one when Shawn's
that
in
is
all
the
white.
first
Yeah.
one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It still is the second one. Okay,
Yeah.
The first one's where he's in all white. Okay.
Yeah, the first, that's the one from the WrestleMania where you face Jeff. And
Yes.
then the second one is in Phoenix when Shawn retires.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, both of them are amazing.
I thought they were great. I like the second one better, and I feel like it had that big stipulation with Shawn leaving, which made it even a huger deal, a much more big deal.
Well, the streak comes to an end at WrestleMania 30 against Brock Lesnar. I know you're not there, but it was the biggest story in wrestling. I was there in the building for that, and it was legitimately one of the most insane crowd reactions to anything I've ever been a part of in any sport. What was your reaction to Brock beating the streak? Should it have been saved for somebody else? Should it have ever been broken at all?
Yeah, I was shocked when it happened, but then the more I look back on it, I thought it was brilliant. And no, I think Brock is the guy that should have beat him. On top of Brock being such a legitimate badass, beating him, I mean, they got so much greatness out of Brock, over the next 10 years or so. So yeah, I think it was a good call.
You think the streak was made to be broken?
Well, I think they stumbled upon the streak.
Right. But once they leaned into it, once they leaned into it as a thing.
Once they lean into it, I feel like at some point you can make someone really special. I mean, Brock was already made at that time, but like it helped take him to another level by ending the streak.
I'll play devil's advocate for a minute. Could you make a proper argument that it should have been saved for a Bray Wyatt, a CM Punk, a Dolph Ziggler, someone around that time that needed that one big win that could have taken them to that entire next level?
Dolph Ziggler, no. CM Punk, no. Bray Wyatt, I could see that being a possibility.
Yeah.
Especially because they are characters that both have traces of supernatural, character traits. I could see it being Bray Wyatt. That would have been something that would have been beneficial, especially if you think he's going to be around for a long time. But Brock also fits perfectly because Brock is like legitimately known as like the real deal. So I think it fits and I think it works.
Yeah, listen, I'm with you. I think at the time I might have been a little confused, but in hindsight, who more realistic to beat the streak than Brock Lesnar?
Sure.
And when Brock returned in 2012, it was a little less than spectacular. He had some good matches, but it wasn't anything of, oh my God, this guy's this big, gigantic box office draw. And then when he beat the streak, he just took a whole nother level and became this gigantic box office attraction Suplex City comes, and everything just elevates to that next level where Brock is
Right.
still one of the most relevant names in pro wrestling today. And
Absolutely.
and I think it's directly related to him beating the streak.
I mean, that was a huge deal for Brock. It was going to be a huge deal for anyone, but it really, for Brock, it took him to another level.
You returned to the company in 2017, documented in our archive, extremehardy.com. Did you have any interactions with him that night at WrestleMania 33? If you remember, that was supposed to be his retirement match. He lost to Roman Reigns,
Right.
and he decided to hang around a little more. Did he ever say anything about Broken Matt or anything like that?
I did get to see him at the very end of the night, like before his match, but like right when we were getting ready to get out of there. And obviously, we came in during the show right before a match, so we weren't hanging around all day. But he was like, "Oh man, it's so good to see you, man. I'm so glad you guys are back." That was kind of like that was the exchange that I had with him. And we've had some conversations about Broken Matt, and once again, he was like very complimentary of just like stepping outside your comfort zone and doing something different, doing something fresh, and I think he was appreciative of that, and he thought that was cool. I mean, he's done it so many times in the past, so I think he respected the fact that I was willing to roll the dice and try something very out of the box to try and get over again, and ultimately that is what brought the Hardys back, the success of Broken Man and the Broken Universe.
Hey, peak Undertaker would have been fantastic in the Broken Universe. It would have fit like a glove. So that would have been a cool what if. To have said.
I would have loved to have been his final cinematic match.
And we'll get to that in just a second here. But he does stay on a little longer. He decides that match with Roman Reigns wasn't really what he was looking to do. And he felt like he had a little more in the tank, and he hangs on in hopes. It's this weird like Clint Eastwood journeyman kind of thing that he has going through his career, and he just kind of hangs around until he feels like he has that proper last match. Did he stay on a little too late here, Matt? Let's put on the critical hat for a second. It's obviously subjective. It's his career. It's his right to do things as he wants to do. But was the Brock ending maybe an opportunity there for him to call it a career, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely want to call it on the Brock ending. I think you could have done it after a Bray Wyatt or whatever else. But once again, I think Taker we're very similar how we both love pro wrestling, and we're both very passionate about it. And as long as I can do this, I kind of want to do it. And I really love the fact that my kids dig it now. They really enjoy when they check me out on TV or see my matches or whatever. Oh, can you show us the wrestling match, Dad? Is it on or whatever? And I feel like there's a part of him that just like, I want to do this as long as I can do it. And I can't hate on that because I'm in that same boat. If he was going to go out on a note and retire, that would have been fine if he would have chosen the right scenario. And it's like a match where he really shined, and whether he won or lost, whatever it was, but have one last great final match. I mean, that would have been cool. But I also see the deal how he loved being a pro wrestler. He loved being in the ring, and like WWE, WWF, WWE, I mean, was his home in the big scheme of things, and he wanted to do it as long as he possibly could. I kind of think that was his mentality behind it more than anything else.
Do you think he felt like he owed it to Vince?
Maybe. I mean, it wasn't a financial thing. He was financially set and good, but he feels a great loyalty to Vince, without a doubt. But I also think there's a huge passionate part of Undertaker's core that just loves pro wrestling, and he just wanted to do it for as long as he possibly could.
I mean, I think you talk about their relationship. It's one hell of a testament. In 2014 when Brock did beat the streak, Undertaker was concussed in that match, and very seriously concussed. Vince McMahon left WrestleMania or the main event, which was Daniel Bryan's big crowning as champion. He left WrestleMania to go to the hospital with him, which is pretty surreal when you think about that.
Right.
And just
I mean, that shows not only their love for one another, but that shows the intimacy of their relationship as well.
Sorry, went to a local medical facility. My apologies.
There you go. Okay.
Certainly could not go to a hospital together. Not a chance could they go to the hospital.
But Vince is back. You have to return to the local medical facility. Yes. Vince is back, guys.
This is my favorite sports entertainment podcast in the world, Matt Hardy. I promise you that. So eventually he decides that WrestleMania 36 is going to be his last match, and he's getting ready to wrestle AJ Styles in Tampa, Florida. And the pandemic hits. And instead, they're faced with two options. Undertaker having his last match at the empty WWE Performance Center against AJ Styles, or we could do something different here. And they do what is called the boneyard match.
Right.
And he and AJ Styles have what I would say is probably the best WWE cinematic match to date. And The Undertaker is this hybrid of all the different characters he's played over the years. He beats AJ Styles, and he throws the arm up on the bike, and he sails off into the moonlight. And that is the end of the career of The Undertaker. I would argue, Matt, that your innovations with the final deletion and all of that helped create the perfect ending for the Undertaker character, which is really, really cool. What's your assessment on that?
Well, I can tell you the guy who was in charge of producing the Boneyard match is also the same guy that was with us for the Final Deletion, Delete or Decay, Apocalypto, Total Nonstop Deletion, and that was JB, Jeremy Borash. So, yeah, it was really cool. He actually hit me up after filming. He said, "Oh, man, I think this is going to turn out to be really good." And he was very proud of it, and I was very proud of JB for making that happen as well.
What did you think of the Boneyard match?
I liked it. I thought it was great. I love the fact that our friends, the Good Brothers, they were in it. They had little cameos. Just the whole thing with Taker riding the bike with the pyro and the setting. It was great. And Undertaker's a character that cinematic matches work for him, you know. And I love it. Once again, I would have loved to have done a Broken Matt Undertaker cinematic match. That would have been so much fun.
Could have been very fun, but I think your innovation certainly helped play into that. And I think that's something that you can take as a pretty big part of your career and have a little pride in, knowing that you contributed to something like that, especially with a guy that, like you said, you grew up watching, you enjoyed him, you enjoyed his work. And I think that's awesome. He went into the WWE Hall of Fame last year, and he contributed to your 30 years of Matt Hardy video. And I remember when we aired that, and we were recording it live, your reaction was very genuine. Yeah. You were kind of blown back by that.
I did not expect that. No, that was a great surprise.
What did you make of what he had to say to you there? Because it was very touching for me to see how much he respected you.
Yeah, I mean it really was. It was very humbling, and we had a great respect for one another, especially my last run there and the years before that, before I'd left. So it was really nice. It was really nice to see him come on and say such nice and kind things and just acknowledge me and acknowledge my accomplishments and my run, which is very cool, especially for a guy that, you grew up watching, a guy who's larger than life and a guy who's one of the most iconic and top WWE superstars of all time. It was very special. Once again, thank you for getting that, John.
Of course. Thank you to Michelle McCool, who helped make that happen. So big shout outs to Michelle on that one, who looked great in the Royal Rumble match, by the way. She was a badass in that. So
yeah,
she keeps kicking ass every single year. And her story, by the way, about meeting him is just so funny, where just the Undertaker pursuing her and she wanted nothing to do with him. I think that's hilarious. And they've built a hell of a little family together, and I think it's so great. We got.
I'll never forget. It'd be funny. The guys that I hung with, the little crew, when they were first starting to get together, and you could tell Taker kind of had like a thing for her. But it was funny. So, look at Taker. Watch out, Michelle McCool. She's got him smitten. I remember that was the worst. Oh, look at him. The Undertaker's smitten.
Yeah, that's what she said. She knew he had such a big crush on her. Yeah. And she kind of played with that. Do you have a couple minutes here for a few Ask Matt questions before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Austin asks, favorite version of The Undertaker?
The original Undertaker. The Walking Dead, yet alive zombie Undertaker.
Ryan Pike says, if there was ever a feud between the Hardy Boys and Brothers of Destruction in 2000, 2001, tag titles on the line, what kind of match would it be? A cage match, a TLC, first ever tag Hell in a Cell? What would you like to have done with them then?
I feel like just depending on the match, it would kind of like depend on who wins as well. I feel like if you're in a Hell in a Cell, that's got to be an Undertaker Kane win. I feel like if you do a TLC match, then you can sneak in a Hardy's win because it would make sense considering you have to climb the ladder and get up there. So I would have loved to have done a TLC with those guys. That would have been a lot of fun. I think both of those guys would have put a lot of pride in that, and it would have been something special.
Valerie asks, how would you fantasy book a Broken Hardys versus Brothers of Destruction match, and what type of cinematic match do you think it would be?
I would like to do. We've talked about doing this in the past, Jeff and I. We're talking about doing it with the Usos if something could ever happen at some point, because they would say the Uso Penitentiary. So, well, let's do a penitentiary deletion match. If there was like an old jail that was rented out, I would love to have it. I'll put the Brothers of Destruction in there, where you have the Hardy Boys, you have the Brothers of Destruction, and you fight through this jail. But there's jail cells with like guys throughout their career, they're old enemies, they're old rivals, and at certain points they're let out. They're let out of the cell, and they're interjected into the match. So you have to fight those guys off as well.
Jordan asks a great question. As you moved through your career and became the veteran voice in the locker rooms, are there certain things you've tried to emulate from Taker and the leadership he used to bring to the locker rooms back in the day? And if so, what are they?
Maybe so. I feel like one of the things Taker was really good at, if someone would ask him for advice, he'd be very stern and he'd be very serious, and he would give them feedback and give them criticism, but he would say it in a very productive way. And I feel like I try and do that as well. Like if someone asks me, like, what did I think of their match or this, and I see something that I think they could have done that would have been a little better or would have made it a little more believable or, look a little more credible, then I try and tell them that very straightforwardly.
Wrestling historian asks, how intimidating was it to wrestle The Undertaker?
In the beginning, it was very intimidating just because, this is like a guy that you grew up watching, who you kind of, who was one of your favorites, a hero of yours, so that's kind of intimidating when you think about that. You just definitely don't want to mess up with this highly respected veteran in the ring. But then like just getting to know him over the years, it became just a pleasure to be in the ring with him, whether it was a 6-man tag or whatever else, and you knew his stuff, and it was really easy to construct matches because all this stuff was so over and all this stuff was just so easy to insert into whatever kind of match you were having.
Chunky Love Juice asks, did you ever play a game of dominoes with Taker? It's said that Taker used to love playing dominoes, especially with BSK. You ever get involved with one of those?
No, I didn't. I was never. I may have played with like Godfather a time or two, with Papa Shango, but never with Taker. That was their thing. I remember when we first started coming around as enhancement talent, we would come back. Those guys would be playing dominoes, and there were so many other guys that'd be playing cards. That's like guys would do that to kill time during the days. It would be cards or dominoes, and it was the BSK guys always playing dominoes. But no, I never played with Taker.
Richie Ray says or wants to know, what's a Matt fact that we should all know about The Undertaker?
Oh boy. Okay, here we go. Matt fact: Matt knows Undertaker strongly dislikes cucumbers.
I was hoping that's what you were going to say. What a weird aversion, right?
Yeah.
People would put them in his boots and try to. What goes around comes around, man. Don't find yourself on the end of an angry Undertaker, which gives us 2 more questions here. Kevin wants to know, any funny stories to share about The Undertaker? He comes across as a real serious guy.
Yeah. There was one point where I remember, I want to say it was Midian. Midian had cucumbers in his pockets, and he came to the ring to do something with Taker, just on a live event, on a house show. And he came to the ring to do something with Taker, and he like pulled out the cucumbers, and like Taker jetted out of the ring, where he like half-ass broke gimmick, as opposed to doing like the slow walk or whatever. He's like, "Whoa, what the fuck? Get it out of here, man!" And headed out. Another great one you're talking about is when Booker T was trying to rib him about doing the spinneroonie. That was such a funny moment whenever he said, "There's no way you're getting me to do that. You can try," and he even says before, "You can try as hard as you want for as long as you want. You are not going to get me to do that." One personal story that I have with him, when myself and MVP, we were in the thick of our angle, there was a point where we were down we were on an international tour, and we were downstairs, like in the restaurant or the bar of the hotel, whatever. And there's a photo. I'll try and dig this up and like post it on my Twitter and Instagram, just because I'm referencing it right here. And someone came over, and MVP said, "You know what? You're right. We should be taking more pictures." I said, "Man, we should all take a picture." He goes, "Oh, that's cool. Here's my phone." I said, "Yeah, let's take a picture." And it's like me and MVP and Taker's there, and the 3 of us are hanging out. It's the 3 of us featured in the picture. And someone snaps the picture, and I remember saying, "Okay, you guys ready?" And then I remember Taker says very quickly, he says, "Face off with me, MVP." And like, they're going, and then they take the picture, and then they say, "I'll take another," again, boom. And he just did that so that it didn't look like he was like having a merry old time, like hanging out.
Right.
Very much protecting the gimmick, even in that picture.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I like that. That's a great story there. And here's the last question comes from Derek. He says, "Hey Matt, I'm curious what the consensus from talent was when the Undertaker docuseries was aired. Him finally letting people in seemed to be the end of the longest kayfabe character. Curious on your thoughts on it. Did you get a chance to see the docuseries about the Undertaker?"
No, I haven't seen it all. No, I have not. I have seen clips, but I do. I think that was a big deal because no one protected their gimmick and their character better than Undertaker. And I feel like you could tell he's at peace with being retired when he does that. And it's kind of like at the end of the day, I feel like all professional wrestlers, they want to give all their secrets away, and just finally like live and be a normal person, have a normal life. And that's kind of where Taker was at. And it was really a big deal from him because like people for so long just realized he was so highly protective of everything about his character.
Mm-hmm. That was pretty much my pitch to you about this podcast. I was like, yeah, man, you've reached that point in your career. Like, it's time for you to share these stories. It's time for you to tell these things.
I'm going to give all my secrets away.
Listen, when The Undertaker starts a podcast someday, Dead Man Talking or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
That is going to be must listen. And I'm sure that a certain mortgage lender will probably be all over that one. But that will be a must listen to podcast wherever it may be. This was a really great episode, Matt. I love some of your insight and perspective on The Undertaker. Is there anything else you'd like to add on him?
No, I mean, I'd like to close it off by just saying like, it really was an honor getting to know him, getting to work with him and just the amount of respect he commanded, as a professional wrestler was just unheard of. Really is a pillar of WWF, especially WWE, all those years that I worked there. And, it's cool that I got to work with him. It's cool that I got to know him. And it's cool that we share that mutual respect for one another, especially from his end. I would always have respected him, but it's very cool that it comes from his end as well.
Hopefully you'll get to see him again soon and catch up with him after some years.
Yep.
We got a special guest joining us next week, Matt Hardy. I know you're very excited about next week's episode of The Extreme Life. Who will be our special guest?
Are we ready to stooge it off, John?
I think we're ready to stooge it off. We got to hype this thing up here.
All right. Well, the character version is woo, woo, woo. You know it. And then the real life version is Matt Cardona. And what is next for Matt Cardona? I'm going to hit him with these hard-hitting questions when we get in this interview. I'm going to try and get him to share all his secrets with me. Give all his secrets away, John.
Why are you so excited to bring Matt Cardona on? I know you hold him in very high regard.
I do, because he is a guy very much like me. He isn't afraid to step outside of Alexandria, the safety and comfort zone of WWE. He's not afraid to step outside those walls and go to the indies and hustle and make a dollar and make himself relevant again. And that's exactly what he's done. And he's killed it, man. Yeah. I'm very proud of him and just his creativity, his desire to not be afraid to step out of the walls of WWE/Alexandria. It's something that makes me respect him greatly.
Going to be a great episode. I can't wait to chat with Matt Cardona on here. It's going to be something a little different on The Extreme Life, and I think that is always a good thing. Breaking down that forbidden door, Matt Hardy here on The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. Good luck this week with Dynamite, my friend. Make sure that everyone leaves your 5-star reviews for this podcast. Exactly. He's throwing the hands up. Anything else you'd like to add, good friend?
No, you guys make sure to catch all the AEW programming. Myself and Ethan and Isaiah, the firm Hardy Party, whatever you want to call us now. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting twists and turns that are going to be happening in the next few weeks. So you guys stay tuned in. I think everyone's going to be happy that they've been paying attention to the story and also creatively like how it ends up.
The words have been spoken here on The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. We'll see you next time.
Adios, amigos.
All right, by now, guys, I love talking about old wrestling. What you might not know is it's not my real passion. My real passion is helping people save money. My real passion is getting families out of apartments and into houses. My real passion is getting people's finances aligned so they can retire on time. I hated going to Walmart and seeing the greeter being 80 years old. She should not be working. She should be home. Why is she still working? Because she still has a mortgage. I want to help avoid that for you. The other thing I want to help you with, let's make sure your kids don't get saddled with student loans. If you've got a student loan, why did you get one? Maybe because your parents still had a mortgage. I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm being sincere. There's only so much money to go around. What I want to help you do is figure out where you are right now and where you want to be long term. And I do it at SaveWithConrad.com. I've been doing mortgages for more than 20 years. And during all that time, we've helped tens of thousands of families change their life. I mean, routinely, we're helping our podcast listeners save $500, $600, $700, $800 a month. But more importantly, get them out of debt faster and with cheaper monthly payments. But if you don't think it can happen for you, let me just tell you this. We are not the bank. We don't say no. We say not yet, but here's how. We're going to get you a game plan on how to improve your credit, how to save a little bit of cash, and how to get into that dream house. Maybe you're already in the house, but it would be nice if someday we could put a pool in the back, or one day we want to upgrade to hardwood floors, or remodel the kitchen, or get a badass master bathroom. I can help you do all of that with no money out of pocket right now at SaveWithConrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. And if we can't help you save some cash, we won't waste your time. Check it out, SaveWithConrad.com, NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. And hey, y'all, don't take my word for it. Check us out. We've got an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. And as if that's not enough, go look at our reviews. Read them and weep, haters. ConradReviews.com. You'll see more than 1,000 5-star reviews. Our average review is 4.72 stars. Find out how much money you can save. Take control of your life in 2023 by taking control of your finances. We're going to show you how to keep more of your own money. If you've got credit card debt, what are you paying on that? 14%? 28%? You know you can do better. With the mortgage, though, you may not know this, the interest you pay is tax deductible. And we can even show you how to skip your next 2 house payments. So if you can get a lower monthly payment, pay your debt off faster, get a greater tax deduction at the end of the year, and right now, right after the holidays, skip your next 2 payments, buddy, this is the biggest no-brainer in the history of the world. Find out how much money you can save right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com, or hey man, shoot me an email directly, Conrad@SaveWithConrad.com.